Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Obama administration's transferred 10 Yemeni prisoners from Guantanamo to Oman in what is called a significant milestone. After the transfer, 93 prisoners remain at Guantanamo. Many have been cleared for release for years, some for over a decade. A review board has approved 34 prisoners for transfer, which the White House says will continue over the course of the year. Also Thursday, Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced he's prepared a plan that would move Guantanamo's remaining prisoners to a secure site in the United States. President Obama is reportedly in the final stages of reviewing that plan. Goldman Sachs has reached a tentative $5 billion settlement with federal and state investigators over the investment bank's role in the 2008 financial crisis. Goldman was under investigation for lying about the value of the mortgage-backed securities it sold in the years leading up to the crash. The sale of toxic securities helped trigger the global economic recession. Under the terms of the tentative settlement, Goldman will pay billions in civil penalties. No one will go to jail. Michigan Attorney General Bill Chiette has announced he will investigate the water crisis in Flint to determine whether any Michigan laws have been violated. This comes as Governor Rick Snyder has appealed to President Obama to declare a major disaster over lead poisoning in Flint's drinking water. The poisoning began after an unelected emergency manager appointed by Snyder switched Flint's water source to the corrosive Flint River in a bid to save money. Residents have reported lasting health impacts, including developmental and cognitive impairment in children. Governor Snyder asked for federal aid Thursday amidst new revelations. At least 10 Flint residents have died from Legionnaire's disease during a surge in infections caused by waterborne bacteria. This comes as the World Economic Forum's annual Global Risks Report has ranked water crises as the top global risk to industry and society over the next decade. We'll go to Michigan to speak with Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who headed the September study that discovered high levels of lead in the blood of Flint's children. We'll talk to her later in the broadcast. The Obama administration is expected to announce plans to halt all new coal mining leases on public lands. Obama's proposal follows demands by a coalition of more than 400 organizations that the White House stop issuing new leases for all fossil fuel extraction on public lands and oceans. Speaking on Democracy Now!, Tim DeChristopher explained the campaign's significance.
So there's another 450 gigatons that could be kept in the ground by ending fossil fuel leasing. So it's a major demand, and it's something that I think is kind of a new step for the climate movement, for a lot of the mainstream groups that were a part of this coalition and are a part of this campaign, that we're saying we're no longer operating from a paradigm of deviating from the status quo. We're operating from the paradigm of looking at the challenge of climate change and what's actually necessary, and we're going to find a way to make that happen.
In response to President Obama's planned announcement today to end all new coal leasing on federal lands, spokesman for the National Mining Association, Luke Popovich, said, quote, "It appears they're going after the federal coal leasing program with the intention of keeping coal in the ground." In New York State, 9 activists arrested for blocking construction of a gas pipeline expansion are slated to begin trial, where they'll use the necessity defense, arguing their actions were necessary because of the threat of climate change. On November 9th, members of the group Resist AIM blocked the entrance to the construction area for the proposed expansion of the Spectra Energy Algonquin pipeline, which carries fracked methane gas across the East Coast. The use of the necessity defense in this case comes as 5 climate justice activists on trial in Washington state for blocking a mile-long oil train are also arguing their protest was necessary because of the climate change threat. NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, has reopened its investigation into accusations that members of a Navy SEAL team brutally beat several Afghan prisoners at a remote outpost in southern Afghanistan in 2012. This follows an investigation by the New York Times that found 3 Navy SEALs dropped heavy stones on the detainees' chests, stomping on their heads and pouring bottles of water on their faces in a modified form of waterboarding. One of the detainees was beaten so badly he eventually died from his injuries. To see our interview on that story, you can go to democracynow.org. In Chicago, demonstrations dubbed Black Wall Street are planned today to protest fatal police shootings of African Americans. The actions come a day after a federal judge forced Chicago to release another video of a fatal shooting of another unarmed African American teenager named Cedric Chapman. The 17-year-old Chapman was killed by Chicago police officer Kevin Fry in January of 2013. The video footage from traffic surveillance cameras shows Chapman running away from two officers who are chasing him down the street. One of the officers is clearly holding a gun. Both videos partially obscure the shooting itself, but each show Chapman crumpling to the ground after shots are fired. Police had claimed Chapman turned and pointed something at the officers, but neither video shows any signs that the teenager turned. Police later learned Chapman was holding only the case of his iPhone. Police have said Chapman was being pursued as a suspect in a car theft. Officer Kevin Fry, who killed Chapman, has reportedly had at least 30 civilian complaints filed against him over the course of his career. Chapman's family has sued Chicago over the shooting. The release of this video footage comes amidst increasing calls for Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuels' resignation over a possible cover-up after the police shooting of another 17-year-old teenager, Laquan McDonald, who was shot 16 times by white police officer Jason Van Dyke more than a year ago. A new investigation by the Chicago Tribune suggests Mayor Emanuel may have known the details of the McDonald case far earlier than he's admitted. The investigation shows Emanuel's closest aides were concerned the McDonald case might create a political firestorm as early as December 2014. These aides and top police officials all began closely tracking the case. They also held multiple meetings with Emanuel over this time period. In April, during the mayor's re-election campaign, Chicago agreed to a preemptive $5 million settlement with Laquan McDonald's family after they obtained video footage of the killing. In Alabama, a federal judge has thrown out the civil rights case against the former Madison police officer accused of using excessive force against an unarmed Indian grandfather who was left partially paralyzed. In February 2015, Officer Eric Parker and other officers approached Sureshbhai Patel as he was taking a walk. A neighbor had called 911 to report a, quote, skinny black guy in the neighborhood. Dash camera footage shows police slamming Patel from a standing position face first into the ground. On Wednesday, Judge Madeline Hughes Haikala granted a motion to acquit Officer Eric Parker following 2 mistrials last year. And in upstate New York, Ithaca College president Tom Rochon has resigned after months of protests against racism on campus. This comes 1 month after students voted overwhelmingly to cast a vote of no confidence against Rochon. Students have accused the college president of responding inadequately to racist incidents, including one where an African-American alum was repeatedly called a savage by 2 white male fellow alumni at a public forum on Ithaca College's future. Speaking on Democracy Now! In November, Ithaca College professor Peiyi Erwele discussed the campus's grievances with the college president, Rochon.
I think the crisis we have at Ithaca College is certainly a long-standing historical struggle with President Rochon, who faculty, students, and staff have found to be an unaccountable, unresponsive, and alienated leadership. And so this has been a long-standing struggle with the administration to create a community that is inclusive, not only of race, but of student voices, faculty input, and staff input. And so we've had many incidents over the past few years since Rochon has been in office that describe and show eloquently that he has absolutely no regard for the contributions of members of the community.
That was Ithaca College professor Peiyi Erwele. On Thursday, the group POC at IC, that's People of Color at Ithaca College, which has led the protests, celebrated the announcement of Rochon's resignation, writing on Facebook, quote, "There is power in the collective. We did it." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.